Hi and welcome to this modern lesson in which we're going to discuss a very important question: what does a BYOD lesson actually look like? So I wanted to start thinking about this question by putting where we are now with education into some sort of context. So I want to think about traditional learning, the traditional learning environment in fact, and thinking back to this current cycle of education that we're in, which many people still consider beginning in sort of Victorian times. It looked a little something like this. You can see everybody sitting at desks in straight rows. Ordinarily the teachers would be at the front of the room delivering the content, and that gets you thinking, what does my own classroom look like? Well, it probably looks something a little bit like that. Desks all in straight lines. If there were students, they'd be sat neatly at the desk facing the front where the teacher would be delivering the content. And that's sad, I think, that education hasn't moved on as quickly as so many other aspects of life. So I have an acronym for you about what I think a BYOD lesson should be. So I have an acronym, this word fact, for what I think a BYOD lesson should look like. And this is how it goes. I think that a BYOD lesson should be fluid. It should be active. It should be challenging. It should be thoughtful. If I may, I'm just going to talk a little bit about these words and what I think that they mean in a little bit more detail. So when I say fluid, I feel really strongly that technology in the classroom is a good thing, but it mustn't disrupt the lesson, it mustn't disrupt the flow of the lesson, the flow of the learning, the flow of the teaching. The use of them needs to be, the use of the devices needs to be fully integrated into a lesson. It shouldn't feel like there's one type of learning that's done without the technology, there's another type of learning that happens with technology, and the two just don't fit together in any way, shape or form. Technology in the classroom needs to be embedded, it needs to be natural, it needs to happen without you really having to think about it. And of course this takes time, and you can't go from nothing to fluid technology embedded learning, but that should be your ultimate goal, that there isn't this conflict between no technology and technology, that learning can happen with both in any way almost all of the time. That said, thinking back to that classroom that you just saw, the great advantage of BYOD having devices in the classroom is that learning can be active. You don't have to be sat in rows behind a desk at a chair. You as the teacher don't have to be tethered to the front of the classroom. You should be free to move around, to interact with your students. Obviously this can happen without devices in the classroom, but the devices themselves mean that the student becomes mobile. They can be wherever they want to be and engage with their learning, should they be engaged by the content that you're giving them. And I think that this is really valuable, because learning can be something that doesn't just have to happen in the classroom anymore. It doesn't have to then just be extended with homework that happens in a bedroom or at the kitchen table at home. It can happen anywhere. It can happen on the way home, on the way to school. It can happen whenever you want it to, because the students have understood that the device isn't just for whatever it was they used it for before, it's for learning as well, and that makes the learning more active. But also in the classroom itself, these students don't have to be stuck behind desks. They can move about, they can engage with each other. Maybe you will have a policy that will allow them to move around the school site to do research. That maybe there are QR codes all down your corridors that you want them to go and explore. Maybe you want them to go to the library and start engaging with information that's in there. Or maybe, there's so many options. But basically, BYOD facilitates a more active kind of a learning. The C and the T for me in this acronym are the most important. BYOD lessons need to be challenging. It's really easy to use technology in a classroom. Really easy. But it's easy because you can do it so very, very badly. You can think, right, these students have devices, that means they have the internet, that means they can go off and do research, and I can sit back and hope for the best. And in some respects that's an entirely legitimate idea, but that is not a starting point for learning. That is something that you are hoping by the time your students are ready to leave your school, your environment, that's what they could do. Maybe if your students are at university level, then maybe that's exactly what you expect them to do. But if we think about younger students, they still need a structure to their learning, and they need that structure to be based around challenge. They need to be pushed and pressed and coerced to stretch themselves. And all of those words I mean positively. It's too easy to say, right, go and find out whatever you can about medieval Britain. And good students will find out more than weaker students. That's natural, that happens anyway. But you can not rely on the device doing the work that you could do in encouraging and cajoling and challenging your students. That when you set work that is based around them using a mobile device in the classroom, you need to have the right infrastructure in place. There need to be markers or goals that they're aiming for that help you gauge how they are engaging with the material and helping them be challenged and stretched along the way, so that they know whether they're a weak or a strong student, that there is a point in which you expect them to reach, that there is a minimum standard, and you can help them understand what these standards are. And eventually maybe you won't have to put those in place, but certainly to start with, you have to make the challenge element of your task really, really clear. And that leads me on to the T, that your use of these devices needs to be thoughtful. You need to be challenging, but you need to have really thought about how you are going to use these devices. You can't just expect them to rock up to your lessons with internet access, with access to things like Evernote, and think, yeah, that's it, that's the solution, isn't it? They've got internet access, what more do they need? You have to think about how to use these devices in a constructive way that challenges them to use these devices in ways that they don't necessarily even know about. And when I introduce students to the iPad, the first few things I show them are iBooks, which they really have no idea about, other than the fact that they knew you could buy books. They didn't know about the fact you can highlight and search text and this sort of all the interactive elements to it. I show them how to share notebooks in Evernote, and all those sorts of things that they don't do. They use Twitter, they use Snapchat, they use Facebook, and they use those things quite well, but they don't know how to use these devices for learning. So it's really important that we put the thought into how to use these devices effectively, so that they are learning not just the topic that you're teaching them, but they're learning how to responsibly use these devices. So what else is there to a BYOD lesson? Once you sort of got these elements clear in your head? Well, there's the thing that you need to make sure that you are utilising great content. Everybody that has a device in your classroom basically has a powerful computer, but they also have this. They have a microphone, they have a camera, and then it's about utilising the great web-based and app-based content that's out there. The video power of YouTube, the storage and sharing capabilities of things like Google Drive and Dropbox, the really unlimited possibilities of Twitter and Evernote. And this is just a taste. This is a tiny set of examples, but these are things that are really powerful. You combine some of these things and you have genuine collaborative, creative learning where students are taking responsibility and creating great content, hopefully engaging with great content that you might have sourced for them or you help them discover. You can use Dropbox to share material with them. You can get them to follow people on Twitter. You can set up a sort of pretend scenario on Twitter. I know I've got a teacher friend who set up a mock scenario where different students took on different characters who they set up Twitter profiles for on Twitter, and they recorded the conversations between these characters. There's great content on YouTube. There's a lot of rubbish content on YouTube as well, so you're going to have to help them understand and filter through all of that. But there is so much great content out there, and it's important that a BYOD lesson is utilising what is good, but it's also helping students understand what the difference between good and bad content is, because you'll be surprised how unaware they are of the difference between really strong and really quite mediocre content. Because it's all packaged the same, they find it harder to discern. That is a key part of our job in the BYOD classroom. Okay, so really just to as a final recap, just want you to think about this just one last time. If you take one thing away from what does a BYOD lesson look like, it should have these elements to it. It should be a naturalistic, fluid thing where the technology plays its role but isn't necessarily taking centre stage, isn't necessarily being showy. It's just there facilitating good learning. It allows your students to move around, maybe even move around outside of your classroom. It allows them to take their learning home. It just simply allows them to be more active in engaging with their learning. And the tasks that you set up need to challenge them, and they need to have been well thought out. And all of these things are totally obvious. Of course, if you're a good teacher, you will do these things anyway. And I think part of the battle with BYOD is understanding that it's not something new necessarily. It doesn't have to be you rewriting your pedagogy. It is just about you adapting to a new set of tools that you can use. But if you're a great teacher anyway, these things will come naturally. If you're learning your trade or trying to relearn your trade or re-engage or revitalise your teaching, then this is a good starting point. Keep this thing in mind, this acronym FACT, keep this in mind, and your BYOD lessons will be strong and they will be successful, and your students will engage with them. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Thank you.